The impossible settlement. Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. The intergalactic void was not meant for the living. Every species in the known universe understood this fundamental truth. The Galactic Assembly had documented it thoroughly over 8,000 standard cycles of exploration and research. The space between galaxies was a desert of emptiness so profound that even light itself struggled to cross it. Atoms drifted alone for millions of years without meeting another particle. Temperatures hovered barely above absolute zero. There was no fuel, no resources, no hope. It was a place where ships went to die, not where civilizations were born. Yet on the bridge of the Assembly survey vessel, Eternal Watcher, Captain Voran stood frozen in disbelief as his sensors painted an impossible picture across the holographic displays. Voran belonged to the Keltharan species, beings who had explored the cosmos for longer than most civilizations had existed. His people were methodical, logical, and prided themselves on their understanding of what was possible and what was not. The tall, crystalline captain turned all three of his optical sensors toward his chief science officer, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of the data. The science officer, a floating mass of bioluminescent tissue named Quarus, pulsed with colors that indicated deep confusion. The readings had been verified 17 times. There should be nothing in this region except darkness and the faint whisper of cosmic background radiation. Instead, their instruments detected structures, multiple structures, spread across a volume of space that defied comprehension. The structures were massive, larger than anything that should exist in the void between the spiral galaxy and the neighboring Andromeda cluster. Energy signatures blazed like stars against the absolute blackness. Life support systems hummed with power. Atmospheric readings indicated breathable environments inside sealed habitats. Most shocking of all, the structures were not ancient relics from some forgotten civilization. They were active, thriving, and according to the spectral analysis, they were human. Voran knew of humans, though his direct experience with them was limited. They were a young species from a minor arm of the spiral galaxy, notable primarily for their aggressive expansion and their tendency to ignore warnings about dangerous regions of space. The Assembly had classified them as promising but reckless, a species that would either mature into wisdom or destroy themselves within a few thousand cycles. The communications console chirped with an incoming transmission. Voran gestured for his communications officer to play it. The voice that emerged was distinctly human, female, with an accent that the translator struggled to place. It carried a tone of casual friendliness that seemed wildly inappropriate given the location. The human greeted them warmly and identified herself as Captain Maria Santos of the settlement network known as the Threshold Colonies. She welcomed them to what she called the Deep Reach and offered assistance if their vessel required repairs or resupply. The casual nature of the offer, as if they were docking at a busy trading station rather than floating in the most hostile environment imaginable, left Voran momentarily speechless. He responded carefully, identifying himself and his vessel, and requesting permission to approach their settlements. He needed to understand what he was seeing, needed to comprehend how any species, let alone humans, could survive in a place that every known law of economics and physics said should be absolutely uninhabitable. Captain Santos granted permission immediately and transmitted navigational coordinates. She warned them that the journey would take several days even at their vessel's maximum sustainable speed, but assured them the trip would be worth it. As the Eternal Watcher adjusted course and began its journey deeper into the void, Voran found himself staring at the cosmic emptiness that surrounded them with new eyes. 3 days later, the Eternal Watcher decelerated as it approached the coordinates. What Voran saw defied every expectation he had tried to form during the journey. The first settlement, called Foundation Point, was a massive rotating wheel of metal and composite materials that hung in the absolute darkness like a defiant beacon. Solar collectors stretched outward for hundreds of kilometers, drinking in the faint light from distant galaxies. Fusion reactors glowed at the hub, their carefully controlled reactions providing power that should have been impossible to maintain this far from any star. Around the central wheel, dozens of smaller structures orbited in precise patterns. Agricultural modules with transparent sections showed green growing things inside, plants that had no business existing millions of light years from any sun. Manufacturing facilities churned out components and materials. Defense platforms watched the approaches with obvious vigilance. Everything was connected by a web of transport tubes and docking pylons that spoke of decades of careful construction and expansion. The docking procedure was smooth and professional. As Voron and his senior officers prepared to disembark, Chorus pulsed with colors of scientific excitement mixed with philosophical uncertainty. The science officer had been running calculations throughout the journey, trying to determine how such a settlement could be sustained. Every model suggested it should fail, should collapse under the weight of its own resource demands within months at most. Yet Foundation Point had clearly been here for years, possibly decades. As the airlock cycled and Voron stepped into the human settlement, he was struck by the contrast between the patchwork exterior and the surprisingly orderly interior. The corridors were clean and well-maintained, though they bore the marks of constant repair and modification. Humans moved through the passages with purpose, nodding respectfully at the visitors, but showing no particular surprise at seeing aliens aboard their station. Captain Santos met them in a large observation gallery that offered a breathtaking view of the void. She was a woman of perhaps 50 standard cycles by human reckoning, with dark skin and silver hair pulled back in a practical style. Her clothing was utilitarian, but well cared for, and she wore a jacket covered with patches from various human organizations and settlements. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine, and her eyes held the sharp awareness of someone who had survived things that would break most beings. She gestured toward the darkness beyond the transparent walls and began to explain what Voron was seeing. Foundation Point was not alone. It was the first of 43 settlements that humans had built throughout this region of the intergalactic void, connected by a network of navigation beacons and transport routes that formed what they called the Deep Reach Highway. The story she told was one of desperation transformed into determination. 38 years ago, a human colony fleet had suffered a catastrophic failure during an experimental faster-than-light jump. The failure had deposited them here, in the deepest darkness between galaxies, far beyond the reach of any rescue mission. 15,000 colonists had faced a simple choice: wait for death or fight for life. They had chosen to fight. Using the wreckage of their colony ships, they had built Foundation Point. Every scrap of metal, every circuit, every seed had been precious beyond measure. They had cannibalized their vessels down to the framework, transforming machines meant for a single journey into the foundation of a permanent home. The colony ship's fusion reactors became their power source. The hydroponic bays were expanded and optimized. Life support systems designed to sustain people for a few years were re-engineered for indefinite operation. The first years had been brutal. Santos spoke frankly about the losses, the failures, the desperate improvisation that had marked every day. 4,000 people had not survived the first decade. They died from accidents, from equipment failures, from the simple grinding stress of living in a place that wanted them dead. But the survivors had learned, adapted, and ultimately thrived. They had discovered that the intergalactic void was not quite as empty as the Assembly had believed. Rogue planets drifted through the darkness, ejected from their home galaxies by gravitational interactions. These nomad worlds carried resources: water ice, metals, organic compounds. The humans had learned to track these nomad worlds, to intercept them, and to mine them for everything they needed. What had begun as survival became something more ambitious. As the settlement stabilized, the humans looked outward and asked themselves a bold question. If they could survive here, could they do more than survive? Could they build something permanent, something meaningful? The answer had been yes. New settlements were constructed at intervals along what would become the Deep Reach Highway, each one positioned to serve as a waypoint for vessels traveling between galaxies. What the Assembly had considered worthless void, the humans had recognized as prime real estate. They were building a shortcut between major galactic clusters, a route that would reduce travel time by 70% compared to the long journey around the rim.
Santos pulled up holographic displays showing the full scope of their achievement. Voren studied the data with growing astonishment. The human settlements had a combined population of 96,000. They operated mining facilities, manufacturing centers, agricultural stations, and even research outposts studying the unique conditions of the intergalactic medium. They had built a functional economy based on trade, services, and the unique resources they could provide to any vessel willing to use their route. The political implications struck Voren with sudden force. These humans had not asked permission from the Galactic Assembly. They had not filed territorial claims or requested recognition. They had simply built a civilization in a place everyone else had dismissed as worthless, and now they were presenting it as an established fact. Santos seemed to read his thoughts because her expression shifted to something more serious. She explained that the Deep Reach settlements had declared the
Empire of the Dark. Over the following weeks, Captain Voren and his crew traveled deeper into the Deep Reach network aboard a human escort vessel called the Pathfinder. The journey itself was a revelation that challenged everything Voren understood about space travel and resource management. The humans had established a chain of navigation beacons that stretched across thousands of light years, each one broadcasting positioning data and serving as emergency shelter for vessels in distress. Between the major settlements, smaller outposts dotted the void like stepping stones across an infinite ocean. These waypoints were automated or minimally staffed, but each one represented a triumph of engineering and determination. They collected trace hydrogen from the intergalactic medium, processed it into fusion fuel, and offered it freely to any ship that needed to refuel. The generosity seemed illogical until Voren understood the deeper strategy. Every vessel that used the Deep Reach highway became invested in its continued existence and success. The second major settlement they visited was called Crossroads Station, and it made Foundation Point look modest by comparison. Crossroads had been built not from salvage, but from materials mined and manufactured entirely within the void. Its structure was less patchwork and more intentional, a massive complex that served as the primary commercial hub for the entire Deep Reach network. Here, Voren witnessed something that his assembly training had never prepared him for. The station hosted a thriving marketplace where humans traded with visiting merchants from both the Spiral Galaxy and Andromeda. Exotic goods flowed in both directions, along with information, technology, and cultural exchange. The humans had positioned themselves as the essential middlemen for intergalactic commerce, and they were profiting handsomely from it. Station Administrator James O'Coffer greeted the assembly delegation with the easy confidence of someone who knew his settlement's value. He was a broad-shouldered man with skin as dark as the void beyond the viewports and a laugh that seemed to echo through the corridors. O'Coffer had been born on Foundation Point, part of the first generation of humans to grow up entirely in the intergalactic void. He spoke about the settlements with the pride of someone describing their homeland, because that was exactly what it was to him. He had never seen Earth, never walked on a planet, never experienced weather or oceans or any of the things his parents had left behind. To him, the Deep Reach was not a harsh frontier, it was simply home. He gave them a tour of the commercial districts where vendors sold everything from rare elements mined from rogue asteroids to unique foods grown in void-adapted agriculture. The marketplace hummed with activity and possibility. What fascinated Voren most was the diversity of the human population. These were not just the descendants of the original colonists. Over the decades, other ships had arrived, drawn by rumors of the impossible settlements in the void. Some were refugees fleeing conflicts in their home systems. Others were explorers and adventurers, seeking new frontiers. A few were criminals or outcasts, looking for a place beyond the reach of galactic law. The Deep Reach welcomed them all with a simple philosophy that O'Coffer explained with passionate clarity. If someone could work, contribute, and respect the community, they belonged. The void did not care about past mistakes or social status. It only cared about what a person could do today and tomorrow. This openness had created a culture unlike anything Voren had encountered in his extensive travels. The settlements were melting pots of human diversity, united by shared hardship and common purpose. The next stop on their journey was a mining operation called Nomad Harvest, and here Voren finally understood how the humans sustained their impossible civilization. The operation was centered around a rogue planet designated NH7,
a wandering world roughly twice the size of Earth that had been ejected from Andromeda millions of years ago. The planet drifted through the void in eternal darkness, its surface frozen to temperatures that would shatter most known materials. But beneath that frozen crust lay wealth beyond imagination. The humans had established a network of deep drilling facilities that penetrated kilometers into the planet's interior, extracting metals, radioactive materials, and complex organic compounds that had been preserved in the planet's frozen core. The mining crews worked in conditions that would terrify most species, descending into shafts drilled through ice and rock where a single equipment failure meant certain death. Voren met with Chief Mining Engineer Sarah Nakamura at one of the surface installations. She was a compact woman with hands scarred from decades of hard labor and eyes that sparkled when she talked about her work. Nakamura explained that the Deep Reach had identified 47 rogue planets within their operational zone, each one a treasure trove of resources just waiting to be harvested. The planets varied wildly in composition. Some were gas giants whose atmospheres could be scooped for fusion fuel. Others were rocky worlds rich in rare earth elements. A few were ocean worlds, their surfaces covered in frozen water ice that could be melted and processed to support human life. The humans had developed specialized techniques for each type of world, turning the void's wanderers into the foundation of their economy. Nakamura showed them one of the deep shaft operations, where massive drilling machines chewed through frozen rock, guided by human operators who worked in rotating shifts to maintain continuous extraction. The efficiency and scale of the operation impressed Voren deeply. The humans had transformed what should have been a liability, their isolation from conventional supply chains, into an advantage. They were completely self-sufficient, beholden to no external authority for their survival. This independence gave them leverage in negotiations and made them formidable in ways that went beyond military power. From nomad harvest, the journey continued to an agricultural settlement called Green Horizon, and here Voren encountered another dimension of human adaptability. The settlement was devoted entirely to food production, with massive hydroponic bays that stretched for kilometers. Inside these carefully controlled environments, human agronomists had created an ecosystem specifically designed for the conditions of the intergalactic void. The plants growing here had been genetically modified and selectively bred over decades to thrive under low-light conditions and resist the constant bombardment of cosmic radiation. Lead agronomist Dr. Chen Wei walked them through the cultivation chambers, explaining the intricate balance of nutrients, light, and atmosphere that kept thousands of humans fed. Chen was an elderly man whose hands trembled slightly, but whose mind remained razor-sharp. He had been part of the original colony fleet's agricultural team, and had spent nearly 34 years perfecting the art of growing food in the void. He showed them wheat varieties that matured faster and produced higher yields than their Earth-based ancestors. He demonstrated rice strains that could grow in nutrient solutions with minimal water waste. He presented them with vegetables that had never existed on Earth, hybrid species created through careful experimentation to meet the specific nutritional needs of void-dwelling humans. The pride in his voice was unmistakable as he described each innovation, each small victory over the hostile environment. But it was at the next settlement, Observatory Prime, that Voren truly understood the depth of human ambition. This facility was positioned at the furthest edge of the Deep Reach network, deeper into the intergalactic void than any permanent installation had a right to exist. Here, human scientists had built what they claimed was the most advanced cosmological research station in the known universe. The location was perfect for astronomical observation because there was no light pollution from nearby stars, no gravitational distortion from local mass, nothing but pure darkness and an unobstructed view of the cosmos. Chief Scientist Dr. Amara Johnson greeted them with barely contained excitement. She was young for a human, perhaps 30 cycles, with dark skin and hair gathered in intricate braids that floated freely in the station's low-gravity sections. Johnson had been born in the Deep Reach and had grown up staring at the universe from this unique vantage point, and that perspective had shaped her entire career. She showed them observations of distant galaxy clusters that revealed gravitational effects never before documented. She presented data on the cosmic microwave background radiation that challenged existing theories about the universe's formation. She explained how the void's darkness allowed them to detect faint signals from the earliest epochs of cosmic history, signals that would be drowned out by stellar noise in more populated regions of space. The research being conducted here had implications far beyond human interests. It was contributing to the fundamental understanding of reality itself. Johnson made it clear that the humans were willing to share their findings with the broader galactic scientific community, but only through formal partnerships that recognized the deep-reach settlements as legitimate sovereign entities. Knowledge, like everything else the humans had built in the void, came with conditions. As the tour continued through settlement after settlement, Voren began to see the complete picture of what humanity had achieved. This was not just survival. This was the creation of a new civilization with its own identity, culture, and vision for the future. The deep-reach settlements had their own government, a council system where each settlement sent representatives to debate policy and make collective decisions. They had their own defense force, a fleet of patrol vessels and armed stations that made it clear they could protect their territory. They had their own economy that was growing stronger each year as more vessels discovered the advantages of the deep-reach highway. They had their own culture, a blend of Earth traditions and new customs born from the unique challenges of void life. Most importantly, they had their own determination to remain independent and autonomous. The political situation came to a head when Voren was invited to attend a session of the Deep Reach Council at Foundation Point. Representatives from all 43 settlements gathered in a large chamber that had been carved from the original colony ship's assembly hall. Captain Maria Santos, who served as the council's elected chairperson, called the session to order and invited Voren to present his observations. He stood before the council and spoke honestly about what he had witnessed. He acknowledged the remarkable achievements of the human settlements and the strategic importance of the Deep Reach Highway. He also explained the reality of galactic politics and the challenges that would come with seeking